Yeah, we're just coming at the tail end of this. And so I just wanted to have this kind of open-ended question for you because, you work and you have so much insight on a lot of moving parts when it comes to commercial real estate. That's not front and center. That's why I really want to invite you, because I think our typical guests have been brokers and developers. And of course, they're kind of sharing their unique perspective on deal flow and sponsors and how they prospect and all that, and what they're developing and why, right? So we've gotten kind of those questions a bit answered so far. But now this institutional family office side, where you're looking at a little bit more, I would say, complicated financing structures. And it seems like if you aren't doing it, it's tough to grasp, is what I'm trying to say, right? So if you have something you want to kind of share with the audience, and again, we're hoping our audience is just mainly already doing commercial real estate in Los Angeles, but we're starting to pick up a lot of users that are in the residential space that also want to learn. And the barrier of entry has always been information, I think, in commercial real estate. So whether it's the complex financing that you're dealing with, or it's land use and zoning, these are things that have been difficult for them to traverse, to even attempt to work in both fields. So yeah, anything you would like to share, insight or advice, or the floor is yours.
Sure. No, look, I appreciate that. That's that's a lot to bite off, and I don't know if I'm an authoritative source or old enough to be giving that kind of advice. I think here's what I'd say from my experience. Number one, whether you're evaluating your first commercial real estate project or you're doing large and complex projects, you'll want to get your service providers input on deals early. And that's primarily attorneys and brokers. And if it's a development deal, it's your architects and your GCs. You want to get them involved early. You don't necessarily have to start running up giant bills early, but you definitely want to sort of bounce your project off of them as early as you can. And that, entails building a good network of service providers. And frankly, mentors are key, especially for the folks that are first starting. And you want to try to have a mentor in the space that is somebody that you would like to grow into, and you might want to bounce your project off them, because the collective knowledge between your service providers and your mentors can really be the difference between running around like a headless chicken and being able to zero in on a project that actually pencils and actually works. So, I would say, number one, build that network, leverage that network, utilize it, as much as you can. That's probably my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is going to sound a little rudimentary, but I think it's true. And I think it's sort of been heightened. There's so much data that's been thrown at us now in that technology age and in the COVID era, when, we're spending so much time at home and screen time. And I've often thought, like, gosh, I'll read one article 1 minute, and then the next minute I'll read another article, and the two will be diametrically opposed. There's just never been more disparate data. And I don't know if I'm getting older and so I'm sensitive to it more, or it's just sort of heightened by the environment that we're in. But my second piece of advice is you got to trust your gut. You got to go with your nose. After you leverage your network and your service providers and your mentor and anybody else that you talk to, and try and talk to everybody, everything about your deal, because you don't want to lose it.
Exactly.
Learn as much as you can. But at the end of the day, you've got to distill down what you've learned, and you've got to trust your gut. And if your gut tells you this is a good pursuit, a good deal, I believe in this, and no matter what happens, I'm going to make this happen, you've got to go for it. You've got to go for it, because there is nobody more in tune with your project than yourself, and there's nobody that has more riding on your project than yourself. So, there's probably many other things I could say too, but if I had to distill it down, it's, leverage your network and go with your gut. And if you do both those and you do it well, I think that those are, key components of long-term success.
I think that's the best advice that anyone shared. Maybe I shouldn't say that publicly here, but yeah, those are awesome. And one thing and last thing I want to touch upon is what you had mentioned about critical thinking. And that really stuck in my head, because it seems like what you're talking about with two, articles with, they're at opposite spectrums and they're making valid points, and you could kind of go, well, which of the two, right, do I agree on, right? And I think that speaks to what's going on just socially and kind of politically in America, is that you have this, social media becomes an amplification for some opinions of maybe a few, but then now they're in everyone's face. It seems it's the same thing. There's no few and many at that point, right? If you have the application, it's always in your ear or you're seeing it. What you talked about, critical thinking, is something I think we're missing. Is I think a lot of people, whether they consume content via an algorithm that feeds them into that deeper and deeper hole, and they come out of it thinking the earth is flat. And there are conventions out there. I mean, you've seen the Netflix special, but there are flat earth conventions, right? Where they have models and everything. So where is critical thinking in all of this? Is, law school definitely teaches you that, but I think in general, I think there has to be a minimum amount of critical thinking that's been missing.
I couldn't agree with you no more. And our practice is maybe a good example of this. We tend to run really hard. We tend to set a really fast pace. We want our clients to know that, we are the most responsive out there, and that ultimately we care the most. But part of what we've learned is that, the frequent, consistent communication is super important.
Right.
But there are also times where you want to step back and say, okay, this is pretty complicated. I need a minute here. We need to discuss it internally. I need to digest it. I got to go talk to my analyst. This is a pretty complicated Excel model, or, you guys have proposed something that we didn't think of before. Let us digest it and let you know if it's a good thing. So it's a struggle. And I think it's more a struggle in the COVID era than it's ever been, because, we aren't traveling the way we used to. We aren't going to conferences the way we used to.
We're not socializing the way we used to. Yeah.
Right. We're behind screens a lot of the time. But I would urge folks, and maybe this is the third piece of advice, is that, in trusting your gut, make sure that you've spent time and that you've really thought through, and that you aren't rushing big and important decisions. You don't want to lose too much time, because the old saying, time kills all deals, is true.
Right. Yeah.
And when guys drag their feet and are not motivated, bad things tend to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between dragging your feet and actually spending time and critically assessing, should I turn right or should I turn left? Do I go straight? And so I think there's a time for that. And I think that's always hugely important. And sometimes I have to tell myself, okay, hey, wait a minute, you're pushing too hard here. Step back, missing, how else could you think about this? And that takes time, and that's okay. That's not time wasted, in your day, in your clients' days, in your investors' days. Believe me, that's time that's going to be returned to you tenfold, because it's going to save you from running around like a headless chicken over here because you spent a few more minutes over here. So I think it's a great point, John, and it's one that is sort of easily lost right now.
Absolutely. Zach, amazing. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise.
I've learned a lot. I'm sure our viewers and audience have learned a lot, and we'll be reaching out to you. So, Zach, really thank you so much for this conversation. This was so
Likewise.
awesome.
If you talk to my siblings before I do, tell them I said
I have a deal in play. They got to respond back to me.
There you go. All right.
Thanks so much.